In this video, we're going to be talking about some lost things. Luke chapter 15, Jesus starts to tell these very interesting stories about things that got lost and how a search occurs in response to the lost thing. And then there's a reconciliation. He talks about a lost sheep. He talks about a lost coin. And then he talks about a lost son in order to bring the message home that this is about being lost and found. And if there is a lost and found in the universe, that's where God works. In the midst of broken individuals, losing things that they treasure, mourning the loss, searching for some measure of reconciliation. And then his promise is that things will be reconciled. So Luke 15 is very interesting as Jesus unpacks the story for people. He was a master storyteller. He knew he was speaking as an image bearer to image bearers. And storytelling is a very powerful way to convey ideas because it helps people attune to a story. In good storytelling, we've discovered that brainwaves sync up within an audience of hundreds of people. That heartbeats sync up, that people are emotionally engaged when they hear a great story well told. So I'm going to attempt to tell a few stories today, and maybe you'll get some measure of that, I pray. But as we get into this, I had a friend, her name is Olivia, and she told me this kind of heartbreaking story of when she was a baby. Her mother must have conveyed the story to her. But what happened was Olivia had just been born and her mom had taken her to the mall, and she had Olivia in the car seat at the back of the car, and she knew that there was a friend's wedding coming up and she needed to buy a dress. And so she went in search of just the right dress for the occasion. Now she opened the car door, pulled Olivia out in her car seat and carried her into the mall, and went into the first store that she saw. She found an amazing dress. She went into the changing room. She tried it on. It was perfect. But she thought to herself, listen, I can't buy the very first dress that I see. That would be irresponsible. Let me try and go to 2 or 3 other stores and see if there's something slightly better. And so she left that changing room and she went to 2 or 3 other stores. And about 45 minutes later, she realized, really, that first dress was the best. She should have just bought it there and then and saved all this time. And so she walks back into the original store and she goes back into actually the same changing room. And as she walks into the changing room, she hears these kind of quiet but concerning noises from the corner of the changing room, and she realized, oh, that's a baby. And immediately she goes, oh my goodness, that's not just a baby, that's my baby. Because parenting and motherhood was so new to her that in her rush to go and find a better dress, she had actually left Olivia behind in the changing room for 45 minutes and only went back because of the draw of that original beautiful dress, and not because of a sense of loss that her daughter had been left for 45 minutes unattended. Now, the culmination of that story is kind of wonderful. It could have ended much worse. And when my friend told me the story, I really wanted to pray for her because of abandonment issues as a child. And again, like the first story I told you in our first video, it's both hilarious and terrifying. There's this wonderful mashup of human experience. I'm so glad her mom went back for that dress and found that she had a daughter, reminded herself. Now, these stories are interesting to me because they're human interest stories. And they engage with our humanity in a way that I think kind of triggers something in us, in our hearts and in our being. We feel them in our bodies, and we can relate. We can have maybe a similar story that is somehow connected to that. Every one of us has felt lost at some point in our lives. And I remember my first missions trip ever. I went from South Africa, where I did my discipleship training school with Youth with a Mission, and I went to Madagascar, which was my first cross-cultural mission. And Madagascar, I've been there a number of times. It's a beautiful nation, and they have a very interesting culture, which is this mix between this Asian kind of ethos as well as a French influence in their architecture and in their colonization. And what's fascinating about it is they do ancestral worship. So they worship their ancestors, and once a year they'll spend a lot of money in order to bring the dead body up out of the ground, and it's called the turning of the bones. And as they walk around the corner, the rolling of the bones inside of the coffin is audible, apparently. So it's just a fascinating place. It was my first missions experience, and it was literally like opening a National Geographic magazine and then jumping in there, because the stories and the sounds and the place just had a visual impact on me, auditory impact. It changed the way I tasted, it changed the way that I smelled things, it changed, I was hearing bird sounds and animals and creatures that you don't find anywhere else in the world, just unique to this beautiful nation. And what was interesting was the first night, James and I, a friend of mine on the same school, we went for a walk that evening. And what we didn't realize is there are no blocks, and there are no street names, and there aren't anything to signify where you are. And so we started to walk, and we walked for ages, and every now and again we would see a stall by the side of the road, and we would walk up to this friendly Malagasy lady, and we would say to her, do you know Youth with the Mission, Jeunesse en Mission? And she would look at us and shake her head, and after a while we found that increasingly, as we talked to these different people along the road to ask them directions, they would laugh louder and louder and harder, which we thought was very culturally interesting. But they found us hilarious, especially the lady at the stalls. And then we found out, actually, it's the same lady. We've been walking around and around in circles, and as it got darker and darker, we got more and more desperate. And she thought these white people are just insane. Like they keep asking the same thing. Do you know where Youth of the Mission is? And she found it hilarious because we were actually walking around and around and around, lost. The only thing that saved us at the end of the day, because there were no street signs and because there was almost no hope of us finding our new home, we actually heard someone playing worship songs on his guitar, and that's what finally led us back to the base. Because we heard something that was familiar to us. And if you've ever been to a foreign country for any length of time, whether it was for a vacation or for a missions outreach or for a trip, a business trip, what you find is your senses get heightened. You become hyper aware of sounds and smells and tastes, and some people going to India for the first time, which is one of my favorite nations in the world, they get completely overwhelmed because it's 24/7, never stops. It's so noisy. There's so many smells you've never smelled before, spices and in the marketplace, and it's just a bustle of activity. I love doing street photography, so I just so enjoy going around the corner and seeing a holy cow or a rickshaw just bursting with life around every corner. You never know what you're going to see next, which is perfect for photography. So in these places, you're looking for something familiar, often desperately. Someone who's wearing jeans, just like you were wearing jeans. And part of this is the key to communication is identification, identifying with someone that may look very different than you, but is still human, has human eyes, a nose, a mouth, the same concerns that keep them awake at night, worries, anxieties, joys, and sense of awe about life. It's part of the human condition that we would look to find connection with one another. So this is part of what we're looking at in this part of the journey, is just understanding that our humanity is what connects us, not only to one another, but also to God himself, through Jesus, who becomes incarnate for us, who becomes human and longs to live with us, to experience everything of what it means to be human, and to do it so successfully that he does it without sin, without any fallenness, which is eye-opening and mind-blowing. That Jesus would do that for us, that he would come and make his habitation with us, to be baptized into being human, and not just for a weekend or for an outreach or for a stadium tour, but for a lifetime, for 33 years, as we discover in the Gospels. So let's consider that today. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have a shared humanity with others? What does it mean to share humanity with Jesus? And therefore to share being human even with the Godhead.